Doomed from Awaken, how The Force Awakens set Star Wars on a path of destruction that not even the House of Mouse may be able to abate. In case you haven't heard, Disney is discontinuing most of their planned Star Wars movies due to poor performance, blah blah blah. But the blame for this travesty of galactic proportions lays squarely at the feet of the execs, not the writers and directors, though better ones that actually cared about the galaxy far, far away could have been hired. Again, a boardroom level decision that could have made things better. After all, when a company taints its own franchise, Tron, what else can one expect? The Force Awakens did make money, but only because it was Star Wars plus Disney. How could it not make money at that time? But the movie didn't make sense. It was an abomination. Banking on nostalgia and misplaced need to reboot and revitalize something that didn't need it. Yeah, sure, the prequels were absolutely horrid, but new movies didn't have to worry about the prequels interfering because there was the original series that buffered them. Jar Jar Abrams and his mystery boxes do hold a lot of the remaining blame. After all, a movie, even one that plans on having sequels, needs to have a core plot that is self-contained. And though the people may have tried to explain away that it wasn't a direct ripoff of the original, the fact that they had to even try says that it was. That is not even getting into the rise of the Third Order, completely nullifying the struggles of the original trilogy, and despite them no longer being canon, there were some great stories in the books, especially in the New Jedi Order, that could have made a great movie. Especially the Hand of Thrawn trilogy, which would have been brilliant if it was done correctly. But what we got was not so much. Reintroducing a great narrative to the canon rather than just abandoning decades of work actually makes more sense because there is more that you can use to bank off. And just scratching the surface of why Force Awakens was a shiny bit of excrement, here are 6 ways it could, or in this case, should have been done better. The First Order just rising out of nowhere makes no sense. It could have been a random group of people on the edge of nowhere that had a legitimate front in this new republic that was respected, giving them a cover for doing whatever it was that they were doing. This would serve to get them money and immunity. After all, you can't build another Death Star with no money. And that whole third Death Star thing was a stupid decision, especially considering that it looked like somebody drew it on a napkin. And even though there has been a movie in between the first and last, it could still be retroactively explained in another film. Now, Star Killer Base. Yet another Death Star. No matter what anyone says, it was stupid. No Empire in their right mind would do a third round of a supersized death ray that could be destroyed by a single blaster shot. That is ridiculous, and it is lazy story writing, and Jar Jar Abrams should be ashamed. But even then, it could still make some level of sense. This could have been, perhaps, a false front to keep the masses, the millions of people they somehow duped into following the First Order, complacent and working on a grand-scale, epic-level project. The actual weapon of mass destruction could have been the Sun Crusher. This, again, could still be retroactively written in a new movie. Another thing that would have vastly improved this movie is actually having the Knights of Ren in it. This would have given the Resistance more reason to find Luke. There are these lightsaber-wielding madmen. Help us, Luke Skywalker. You're our only hope. Granted, they could have been on another mission. They could have been hunting Luke Skywalker themselves. But this would still introduce legitimacy, urgency to the mission of finding Luke. Not, oh, the dude disappeared, now we gotta find him. Whoop-de-doo. Also, instead of Luke being alone on a planet, which, by the way, makes him look weak and selfish. I mean, who hides out in the middle of nowhere, letting the galaxy fend for themselves while one wallows in self-pity, especially one that has the power to do something? Luke should have been ashamed. Maybe he was. Maybe that's why he was hiding. Who knows? It still was an idiotic idea. He could have been on this planet in the middle of nowhere, training a new group of Jedi, free from potential dark influences of the rest of the galaxy, which would be why he left a map in the first place. After all, if you're going to hide somewhere, why leave a map? It doesn't make sense. The secret map. When it was shown, it was clearly an eighth of the galaxy, and the people who pilot the galaxy routinely traverse the entire galaxy. Anyone familiar with stellar cartography, aka a starship pilot, should have been able to see where it was. Sure, without that particular piece, the whole galactic map was utterly useless, even though Vader managed to find a rebel base in The Empire Strikes Back after only 2 years, but that's a different story entirely. But knowing they had a missing piece should have been a clue on where to start looking. An eighth of the galaxy is a whole lot easier to look through than the entire galaxy. Instead of this map, they could have had 7 pictographic clues. You may say that would be a little too close to Stargate, but let's face it, the movie was a ripoff of A New Hope anyway, blatant or not, no matter what any of its defenders tried to say. Now, this of course could have led to an interesting crossover, with Teal'c and Ronan wielding lightsabers and Carter upgrading another lightsaber energy core to blow up a planet, who knows? But that's best left to fanfiction. Anyway, it would be too late now. And lastly, Jakku. Another desert planet? Come on. It was too much like Tatooine. The franchise was originally known for its awesome and different planetscapes. Rey should have been on a completely different world. There was an entire galaxy out there to hide somebody on. The best option in this case would have been a world composed of volcanically active archipelagos, like a bunch of Hawaiis. Why, you may ask? It's simple. First off, it would not have been seen as a total ripoff of Tatooine, blatant or not. Second, it could have helped explain her affinity for the Force. How? Simple. One, even on Earth, there are pearl divers capable of holding their breath and swimming underwater for minutes at a time, feats that normal people can't do. And if this is the case, she could have been left to be raised by one of these groups, force compelled to think that she was part of their group. And she would somehow be so much better at holding her breath and swimming far distances and finding the junk than no one else could. And they wouldn't know why. But we would. After all, nobody likes a Mary Sue. I'm all for female empowerment, but come on. That's ridiculous. And if she actually had a family, that would make her have a legitimate reason to stay behind. And the vision that she saw could have made her think that something she was looking for was on that planet that she was on. Unfortunately, without a total reboot, this can never happen. But Disney has abandoned canon before. Then, outside of The Force Awakens, there is the fact that despite the plan for sequels, the original team that started developing this announced trilogy had nothing to do with the sequel, or even with any of the other projects that were on their way, making everything in this new order of Star Wars non sequitur, confusing, and quite frankly, stupid. What, with their unresolved plot hole mystery boxes and completely different direction in each movie? Ugh. I'm all for giving new people a chance to shine. Some of us really need it. But there needs to be some plans, some sense of continuity to make a series work. That is why the Marvel movies are succeeding wildly. And now continuing with The Last Jedi. Again, abandoned plot holes and unresolved issues from the first movies that are just mind-tricked away. And then the introduced plot thread of Luke even contemplating killing Ben before he turns evil. That is so out of character for Luke that one would think he was under the influence of a Sith holocron at the time, which could be retconned into place. And then Rey. Still mastering everything so easily. Again, I am all for female empowerment. Wonder Woman was a great movie, the best DC movie we have had recently. But Rey is still a Mary Sue, and that degrades all the powerful women of this franchise, not to mention that for every other Jedi that has ever existed, they have had to train for years to control their powers. There is really no way Rey should have been able to master anything so quickly, especially seeing as how she hadn't even heard of the Force before the events of The Force Awakens. And Rogue One was not without its faults, tearing open brand new plot holes in an already Swiss cheese universe. Who in their right mind would seek out a known malcontent, force him to design their ultimate weapon, and not watch him like a hawk and double, triple, even quadruple checking everything that he did? It would have made more sense for him to realize that things were going poorly for the legitimate government and voluntarily go in to see if there was some way he could introduce some sort of design flaw or Achilles heel. And then, after not advertising for the Solo movie at all, Disney has the audacity to say it didn't meet expectations. Especially considering when it was released, a week after Infinity War, which broke records. This was a bad time to release any movie that was expected to compete with that movie without having the appropriate groundwork laid to begin with, like Marvel laid their groundwork for Infinity War. This juggernaut that was Infinity Wars was led and brought into being by a group of people that cared about continuity, that did everything they could to make sure everything made sense. Granted, there were some mistakes, like the time inconsistencies between the Spider-Man movie and the rest of the universe, but small price to pay. Everyone involved cared about what was going on. The stars, the actors, the directors, the writers, even the CEOs. Yes, Disney does technically own Marvel, but they were doing their own thing, and that is what made it good. And finally, they advertised the hell out of it. Solo stood no chance. It never did. It's too bad that the mouse acquired a galaxy with only dollar signs in his eyes. A franchise is only as powerful as the people behind it. A great story supplemented with cool toys and gimmicks, not overwhelmed by them, has the potential to make millions. And it was squandered, like Tron. There is still hope, but only if they hire writers and directors that actually care about making good movies that can sell toys, not selling toys as an excuse to make movies and hope they make money. Mickey, please do the right thing. You're our only hope.